Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the show. My name is JT, and this is Big O. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the JT and Big O show. I am your host, Video Geek JT, and our other host, Ryan Big Rodriguez.
And bravo, encore.
And joining us this week is writer, director, producer, actor, and founder of the Westfield International Film Festival, Gina Marie Rodriguez. Thank you very much for joining us this week.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Holy shit, we have a guest. God.
Yes, someone wanted to be on our show this week. It's you are officially our fourth guest, second to be joining us single-handedly. And our first one to talk about musicals.
Yay! I'm excited. Let's go. What are we talking about?
Well, I mean, to be fair, obviously, I wanted to go ahead and talk about music. This was pretty much my idea more so, simply because I think along with 4th of July and Hamilton coming out on Disney Plus, the timing couldn't have been more perfect for them to have done it. And really, I just don't think musicals get enough respect, if that makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, all three of us, we're in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or Pennsylvania, depending on who you talk to. And we know Broadway. Like, we see commercials for stuff all the time. Everything happens within an hour's reach of us. And really, theater just kind of gets forgotten about, I think. Especially now when everyone's talking about the stuff that's not in production, can't be done anymore because of COVID or whatever, any of the reasons. And just as much as movies and television are suffering, theater has been suffering too.
Definitely.
So... obviously, I wanted to talk about this with JT, but JT apparently is not the biggest stage and screen fan in that respect.
I'm a dum-dum when it comes to musicals.
Yeah.
We'll change that soon enough. As soon as Broadway is back up and running, and it will be, then I'll take you to another show.
That's right. You actually brought me to my very first show this year. We saw Beetlejuice together, which was a very amazing show. To a degree.
Fantastic.
Now remember with that show, it had a limited time on Broadway anyway because it was actually getting kicked out of the out of its theater. Do you think in the end it kind of won out a little bit against Hugh Jackman there?
You know, honestly, that crossed my mind, and I don't think anybody really wins here. It's so unfortunate that they had to close even earlier than they were expected to, but everybody had to close. And there were people who were really looking forward to Music Man, and I'm sure that Hugh Jackman was looking forward to it as well. All of these actors are now out of work, and not just the actors, but the crew, the producers, the directors. I mean, everybody. It's so sad to think about, let alone talk about, but yeah, let's reminisce for a second on how that show was. So, yay, Beetlejuice.
Yeah, tell me about Beetlejuice, because I saw enough of the commercials about it. I saw them performing at the Tonys. How close to the original movie is it?
Very
Not
different.
At all.
Yeah, it's very different plot. But I didn't hate it for it. In fact, I kind of like the story to a certain degree, a little better than the movie at times. Would you like to describe the plot a little bit more there?
Well, I want to say that I think I like that it was different than the movie, because I can't stand when they take the exact same script from a movie and say, let's just stage it. Let's do the exact same thing that everybody has already seen except on a stage. Why do you want to go see that when I can just rewatch the movie if you're going to do the same exact thing? So I really appreciate that they took it in a completely different direction. They said it a little bit earlier. I actually don't know if in the movie Lydia's mother was dead or not. Was she?
She was.
No. In the movie, Lydia's mom and dad are perfectly alive. It's the people before
Well, she had a
the people in
stepmom.
the house that were dead.
She had a stepmom in the movie. So I don't know where her mother was necessarily, but in the show, they actually open on her mother's funeral, right?
Yes. In the play they did.
Yeah, and they open with a ballad, which is not typical of a musical at all, and then they of course call attention to that. And there's a lot of fourth wall breaking. Beetlejuice plays the narrative character there, so he's narrating what's happening for, I forget how long, but he's not actually introduced as his own character until a little bit later in the show. It's been a while since we saw it, JT. When did we go see that?
I think we saw that around February, like just before all this COVID stuff started breaking out.
Was it? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my memory is a little foggy on it. I just know that I loved it and I loved the music, and it's available online, which is what I listen to time and time again.
I guess because I was never to a Broadway musical before, I wasn't used to how far they go with a lot of the set design and stuff like that. And that really, to me, was one of the most amazing things, how they were, the sets were like just moving in and out of the stage, and things were just coming out of nowhere. I almost wanted to go back again to see the show because I wanted to see it from a different view, so we get a bit better view of the sandworm, which came out from one side of the stage at one point, like ate one of the characters.
Yeah, I will say our seats weren't great, so that's on me. We were kind of off to, what were we, house left, I think, all the way up in the balcony.
Yeah, and they weren't bad seats, but it's the stage obviously curves in, so there were certain sections we didn't see as well as others, but I'd say we saw it pretty well.
It was a really beautiful show, and since it's the only one that you've really seen, I will say that it's a little different because they set the mood, they set the atmosphere in the theater itself. So there were, they had purple lights and green lights. That was like their color theme, was purple and green, I think. So that was lighting up the actual house before the show itself started. And I think they had music playing too, like this eerie Halloween Tim Burton sounding music. So they really got you in the mood before the show started. But they also had a magic coordinator on that show, which was amazing. So they were doing, a lot of live magic and sleight of hand, which again is not standard for a Broadway musical. It was its own beast, really. But it was beautifully done. It was funny. It was heartwarming. Like it had a little bit of everything, and I love that show. And I'm sad that now no one can really see it, because I don't know if other shows thought to do what Hamilton did and actually film something for posterity. So not everybody has that opportunity. Even though, for those of you who care, Broadway HD, if you want to get the free trial, I'm just saying, there are some shows that were actually filmed, and you can just watch them the same way that you watched Hamilton. I just recently watched Kinky Boots.
So there's an entire streaming network dedicated to showing live performances from these musicals?
Yeah, and not just Broadway. I mean, they have West End stuff, and I forget what else is on there. But I don't think they have like too much of regional theater, but they do have more than just Broadway on there, but largely it's Broadway performances.
So it'd be like the stuff you see at the movie theaters where they'll sometimes advertise, hey, live from the Met, a couple of nights only, showing that sort of stuff. But this would be continuous, like you'd be able to watch it whenever you wanted to?
It's a subscription service. So yeah, if you pay I don't know, maybe it's like $7 a month or something. Yeah, you have access to everything that's on their platform, the same way you do with Amazon Prime or any of the other paid streaming services. But, what I did was cheat and do the 7-day trial and just try to binge everything because I'm cheap.
In this day and age, we're all cheap. It's just a matter of how cheap,
Yes.
But that's good to know. I didn't even know there was a streaming service for something like that. And I would imagine that there would be a video version somewhere of Beetlejuice. simply because whenever you look at like commercials of stuff like that, it's usually done in more of a cinematic format, the clips that they show you throughout the commercial. So there must be something. It's just a matter of whether or not the producers of the show have gone ahead and like put it out. Because I mean, even the one we saw of Hamilton that's on Disney Plus, that was set from 2016, and the show itself had started in 2015. So it was while they still had the original cast, but it was while they were a little fine-tuned. You know, they were a little bit not so much dress rehearsal ready. So hopefully, considering it had a short run, there must be something out there. I would certainly like to check it out by the sound of it.
I hope so, but I haven't heard anything. I know that Hamilton, they self-financed that. So that was their idea, and self-financed from people who have money. It was still
yeah. I was about to say they got that. They sold that thing for $75 million. All right,
yeah.
I think they know how to manage their money.
Yeah, they did well, but it was they had the foresight to say, I think we need to record this. I'm not sure how they do the promotions for Broadway shows, like you were talking about seeing the cinematic commercials on TV for Beetlejuice. I don't know if they film the show in its entirety or if they really do just select moments like they do for the Tonys, like, please, we're going to film you doing this song and this. I honestly don't know the answer to that, but if they do have it somewhere, I hope to God that they'll release it, because it really is a stunning show.
Well, one can only hope that seeing the success of a cinematic Hamilton will spur on other people to be like, oh, hey, since we're not going to be up until next year, let's put that out.
I hope. Fingers crossed.
That being said, JT, considering this was your first foray into Broadway, would you be interested in seeing other things? And if so, what would you want to see?
Yeah, I actually would like to go see some other stuff. I'm not sure really at this time. I don't know what's still active. Obviously, nothing is active at the moment, but once it comes back. I always kind of wanted to see Young Frankenstein. I don't know if that's still around. Kind of want to see Wicked. And there's rumors of Mel Brooks wanting to put together a Blazing Saddles musical, which I wouldn't mind seeing.
Oh my God, I hope. I would just love to see someone do like Tired on stage, full German ensemble, just, really go all Springtime for Hitler with it.
Speaking of which, that's what you should see, the producers. That was great. They actually made that into a movie, not a filmed, but an actual movie. The movie is not, the stage performance was.
Well, that's the thing. That was the movie that became the Broadway show, that became the movie, that hopefully, again, will one day become the Broadway show, because I wish I could have seen it during the Nathan Lane, Matthew Broderick run, but I at least had the soundtrack. And Max Bialystock is like the kind of role I would want to play if I was ever on Broadway, because he's poignant, he's funny, he's a bit of an ass, but you still love him. I love his characterization. It actually, just to swing all this over into Hamilton to a respect, I could say the same thing about King George, Jonathan Groff's performance in the show. Because if there was ever a character that I wanted to do, because Lord knows I can't do much of what the other performers do in regards to the singing and the dance, but I would definitely want to play a King George. That's like my ideal.
He was epic comic relief. I love King George. I love John Groff.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you don't realize it, and oh, hey, that's Kristoff from Frozen. I'm like, I'm surprised they even were able to swing him in there, considering he was already swooped up by Disney at the time. But yeah,
JT's making a face. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Who was playing Kristoff?
Jonathan Groff, the voice of Kristoff. He's the one who plays King George in Hamilton.
Okay, I was thinking you were talking about a different actor. Never mind.
Yeah, no. But the surprising thing is, you look at the presentation of Hamilton. Let's just get into that for a little bit. You look at this original cast, and you see these names that are now very well known, either in the world of theater or outside of it. And it's surprising to see them all kind of culminated into this one stage show. Leslie Odom Jr., Daveed Diggs is probably the biggest breakout outside of Lin-Manuel Miranda. And what is the name of the guy who's going to be in the Heights? The
Anthony
one
Ramos.
who gets shot and end up dying.
Anthony Ramos.
Yeah.
John Lawrence was the character he was playing in the show.
Exactly. Yes, he was supposed to be in the Heights this last month, and that's actually going to be coming out next year instead.
I can't wait for that show. I'm very disappointed that they're waiting to release it. I understand why, but I love that show because Lynn was, I mean, big in the theater world at least because of In the Heights. That was his first really big show.
Right, that's the one that got him like the name recognition in order for him to do what he did.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be nice, especially now that everyone's had a chance to see Hamilton, to be like, oh, well, this is like perfect promotion for like his original baby, you know?
Yeah.
But Gina, obviously you've seen it. JT, did you get a chance to see it at all?
No. For at least Hamilton, the only thing I really got to see is I got to see the trailers for it.
Mm-hmm.
And let me ask you guys this. You guys have seen plenty of musicals in the theater. Now, does it really compare to watching it on TV? Because I'm watching like the taping, at least in the commercial for Hamilton, and it doesn't come off as impressive as I think it would be in the theaters. You also brought up Producers before, in which again they turned that play into a movie, and I didn't really like the movie that much. I feel like filming a play doesn't really capture the play or the musical.
There is some fact to that, especially in regards to Producers, because the thing with Producers is that instead of treating it like a movie like it originally was, with the Producers, you could tell that these things were kind of more like stage sets and kind of boxed in, and it kind of made everything a little bit smaller than it should have. If they actually treated it like a legitimate movie and then just threw in the musical aspect, it probably would have come off better, probably in the same way that the original movie was. But as far as Hamilton, there was very few times that I was like taken out of it by the cinematography, whether it's like the overhead camera or anything like that. So I would say, in respects to something like this where it's so character driven, it's almost more immersive to be seeing it that up close with the camera angles that they had, as long as you still had the audience in the background. I think that was key, that you actually have the audience applauding and gasping and sometimes laughing, because then it's almost kind of like in your own home theater, you're still in it, even though you're not.
So do you think the audience kind of makes it to a degree there? Be sort of like a stand-up performance where like a stand-up comedian be there and they would get like applause and cheers and stuff? Having
absolutely.
The audience.
Same regard. Something like that where the audience can still have a reaction. Like it's one thing if you go ahead and watch a movie at home. It's another thing if you watch a movie in the theater with people around you. And yes, you know, movie theater audiences are kind of a little, but theater audiences, I think they understand what's going on when it's really people up on the stage. So there's a little bit more respect and a little bit more candor and a little bit more of a true reaction that you get from them. And I think that really helps any kind of video that you may be watching of it.
I will say that there is still a stark contrast in watching the Hamilton film versus Hamilton the show. I was not lucky enough to go see it live, and I'm still very
about none of us were.
Well, I actually had tickets to it when it was at the Public. Before it went huge, it was I had tickets to it on the night that they were doing a Q&A with Lin-Manuel, who is my idol, and the whole cast. And then it was the day of the blizzard. And I sat at the train station for 2 hours trying to get into the city, and I wasn't able to do it. So I called the Public and I said, this never happens, but this is an act of God. So can I please have my money back? And
that's not God. That's the devil.
Well, yeah, it was really, really, really disappointing. And then by then it was already sold out. Like I had bought those tickets months in advance. I was going to see it with a friend. She was smarter than me and took a bus in. and she was able to actually make it from Jersey. I wasn't. I really did sit at that train station for almost 2 hours while they kept replaying that announcement. The train should be here in the next 5 minutes. Liars.
Well, NJ Transit.
Yeah, thank you, NJ Transit. So I missed that first chance I had to see it before it cost $500 on Broadway. But I digress. The point was, it's always going to be different when you watch a stage play on a screen. It's never going to be exactly the same. But I do think that, like you were saying, having the audience laughter included in this performance helped a lot. I love that they did a pre-show announcement. They included the pre-show announcement, which was recorded by King George. And then they even had a little intermission for 60 seconds. They gave you a little bathroom.
That was the shortest intermission I could possibly have thought of.
Yeah, like, I could not pee fast enough, so I had to rewind a little bit. They did not give you...
So you didn't even just pause it. You're just like, oh, let me see if I can do it in 60 like they usually do.
I really was timing myself. I'm like, maybe they actually thought this out and gave you enough time to take a bathroom break. They didn't. It was 60 seconds. It was just for show.
That's barely sandwich making time. I don't know what they were thinking.
It wasn't enough time for a real intermission.
So one other thing I guess I should bring up in regards to Hamilton, this doesn't come up as much anymore, but so this show is very much not historically accurate, and there's been a lot of critics of that. What do you guys think about that?
I don't know if I'd necessarily say it's not historically accurate. I mean, obviously, yes, it's putting things of history into a more palatable nature with the song and dance version that they have, but it is still based off of a book about Alexander Hamilton. So, I mean, it's as much fact as we could get considering what was still available as reference at the time. You know, because they say it in the musical that, you know, his wife, Eliza, she just went around and collecting stories from people about him, considering she burned the letters. So this way, that was as much insight as you were going to get in the guy. And when you do something like that, yes, maybe some things are going to be a little misconstrued. But I'd say it's as genuine and honest about the character as we may ever see.
I have to disagree on that, because while it was based on Charnow's book, I definitely think there's a lot of artistic license that was taken there. And one of the articles that I read recently referred to it as fan fiction, a fan fiction version of history, which I honestly think is the most accurate way to think of it. There are a lot of things in it that don't necessarily make sense. Hamilton wasn't like a sweetheart of a guy. You know, he was a slave owner like 75% of the rest of the founding fathers, if not more. They probably all owned slaves. Honestly, this piece attacks it from a different angle, and I think that you can see that from their initial casting, saying, we're going to cast everyone of color. Like, our entire cast is going to be people of color. So we already know from the get-go, this is not going to be 100% historically accurate. Otherwise, we would have had a bunch of white guys up there. So I think it's important to look at it as entertainment, and there are elements of truth to it, but it's not 100% accurate. Even Philip, right? I think in the show, they only mentioned him having a sister. I think Hamilton had like 7 or 8 kids. You know, they had a number of children. Little facts like that are differing because your stakes are higher in a show if you only have one son that you're about to lose. So there's a lot of artistic license taken, but I think the mission of it is to look up to the America that we want to see today. And I lost one of my things here, but it's definitely not 100% what happened. And there's even a moment, and it's one of my favorite moments, where I forget who said it, but one of the characters was saying that Hamilton was had a cat named after him. Martha Washington's feral tomcat was named after Hamilton, and Lynn breaks the fourth wall for a second and goes, "That's true." Mm-hmm. I feel like that moment alone is him calling out, "Ooh, here's an actual fact," just reminding you that not all of these are actual facts. Does that make sense?
No, it makes plenty of sense. And I think that's something that's been said for many years when it comes to people who direct and create plays. And I know I keep saying it's plays, we call them musicals too as well. Um, that people that get to take creative license. So it was like we were talking about Beetlejuice earlier. It's very, very different than the actual film. And actually, Producers is another good example because every time I kind of look at Hamilton and how it's so different than real life, I always think about Beatnik Hitler from The Producers, who's like, "Hi, buddy, how you?" And very obviously, that's not Hitler.
Well, that was a show within a show, though.
Well, Producers is like an Inception, but
Yeah. So that wasn't like the real Hitler in the sense that this is supposed to be the real Hamilton. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure that the parallels are quite the same, but I like where you're going with it.
But could you not say that what we have with Hamilton is probably the most historically accurate that we could get in regards to, you know, really putting on a musical and putting on a show? If you wanted to go ahead and do something that was completely sticking to every little minute detail, could you really have made it as entertaining and as palatable?
In a stage play, I think anything is possible. So until somebody decides that they want to do that, I don't know. Not that I think anybody in the near future is willing to take on Lin-Manuel Miranda and try to beat him at his own
Yeah,
game.
no, that's definitely punching upward.
Yeah, it took him 9 years to get that musical together. So I'm not saying that in the future it could never be done, that you couldn't have something more accurate. Maybe right now, in terms of entertainment, in a musical setting, sure, but that's because it's really the only musical about Alexander Hamilton that exists. So in that sense, yes, it is the most accurate form that we have available to us. But apparently the book, which I have not yet read, but I do want to read, was entertaining enough that Lynn said, this could be a musical. Let me turn it into one.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, if your subject material is what it is, and you base it off that rather than, you know, scrolling through text yourself of, you know, historical document, then you're as being true to the source material as you can be. Now, take, for example, something like The Greatest Showman. You know, when that movie came out, that was rife with criticism in regards to how accurately it portrayed P.T. Barnum. Now, I'd like to think that at least Hamilton is more accurate to Alexander Hamilton than The Greatest Showman was to Barnum.
And if we're comparing the two, then yes, I'd have to say that was more accurate than The Greatest Showman.
Yeah, less egregious.
They're both very entertaining. Say that again, sorry.
Well, less egregious in what they say about the person.
By like a small margin, I feel like, because again, we gloss over the whole I own slaves thing. You know, like there were definitely things that they don't mention about Hamilton that would paint him in an entirely different light. In the same way that P.T. Barnum, they just glossed over the fact that he was a horrible human being for the sake of entertainment, and fun songs hid the fact that this is not reality. I still love The Greatest Showman. I think it's a great movie if you take it for what it is. Fiction. Entirely fiction.
Yeah, it's definitely more popcorn fluff than I'd say is warranted.
Yeah.
But then I also think back to something like Chicago. Chicago is one of my favorite musicals. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is also still based on technical fact, because it's based off of a play, which was based off of a reporter's writings of two actual murderesses who were around in the 1920s. And I think you can stick to that kind of fact and still make it entertaining even all these years after. It's just, I think, a matter of what facts you want to show and which ones you want to omit. Now, I don't know about anybody else. I mean, I was actually debating this exact point a little while ago, because I do like, aside from online movie or trivia, I do online movie debates too. And the question was, what was the best musical of the 21st century. Someone brought up Greatest Showman. I brought up Chicago. Needless to say, I didn't win that argument. And I'm a little upset by that still, as you can tell. But I think there is something to be said for those that can at least stand true to what characterizations they're trying to represent and what they're trying to show, as opposed to really just glossing over completely for the sake of showmanship. So, I mean, for that regard, Hamilton, I think, I don't necessarily want to say it gets a pass because, yes, lots of bad things you could say about the people in that era. But I'd say compared to the other characters that he had to deal with, compared to the other real-life people and real-life circumstances, it's as good as it gets.
I think some could be said that there's no way to truly fit anything in real life into a hero's journey. I mean, you have to always kind of omit facts and gray areas. So nothing's ever going to be perfect when it's part of real life. That's my
exactly.
thought.
You know, you get as close to 90% as you can. That 10%, you know, maybe you can make it up one day, but you know, at least get yourself the A rating.
I'll agree with that.
I'm not saying this to like convert you over or anything.
No.
You're entitled to your difference, obviously.
I feel like we're saying similar things, and I can't actually tell if we're on the same page and just expressing it differently.
That's the beauty of this show. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Confusing and messy, just like real life.
It's similar to any biopics that you watch on the screen. You know, they're going to take artistic license too. Nobody is going to do this 100% accurately because honestly, real life is boring. It's boring. So you have to add something to heighten your stakes. And that's what I was saying earlier. They change certain things just to make sure that there's more drama for the audience.
Well, just to get into your mindset a little bit, and obviously we can explore this anytime, but just to rattle off, what are a couple of your favorite musicals, aside from, obviously, your love of Hamilton and Beetlejuice?
It's hard. Wicked. I loved Wicked. I actually named my production company after a line in Wicked. One of the songs, I think it was Elphaba who sings that she wasn't born for the rose and pearl. My company is Rose and Pearl Films.
I was wondering where that came from. Now I get it.
I had never actually heard the saying before until that song. So I love Wicked. Phantom of the Opera, I think, was my first show that I ever saw. So that holds a special place in my heart. Mm-hmm. I love almost every musical I've ever seen. So it's really hard for me to whittle it down. But if I had to, I will say those two.
So then if that's the case, is there one that you find is like the least favorable of the ones you've seen?
I walked out on one Broadway show.
Do tell.
And it was Evita.
Oh.
I'm still so sad about that because Ricky Martin was in that. He was actually fantastic. He was not the reason I walked out at all. I wish I could have stayed just to watch Ricky Martin do his thing, but he wasn't in it enough to keep me in my seat. And the woman playing Evita, I do not remember her name. I'm very sorry. I'm sure that she's lovely and a wonderful actress, but she was Argentinian. I'm pretty sure she was Argentinian, which great for authenticity, but she had such a thick accent that I couldn't understand a word that she was saying. And I had never seen the show before, so I really couldn't follow what was going on because she was just so, it was such a strong accent that I couldn't understand.
It kind of took you out of it a bit.
It very much took me out of it. And I turned to my then boyfriend at the time and I said, we would have understood this better if she was actually singing in Spanish because know what any of the songs were saying, again, unless it was Ricky Martin on stage, and then I was in love with him. But I walked out on that show. And that's, Broadway tickets are not cheap. I mean, we all know that they're not cheap. So that was a big thing to walk out of a show. And, oh, wait, I did walk out of another show. Just kidding. I'm the worst. I walked out of Pretty Woman. If I had to pick a show that I hated, it's Pretty Woman.
I forgot they made a Pretty Woman one.
It was just, there's so much anger when I think of that show. It's because that's one of those examples where they legitimately took the script. And I don't know if this is because the only way they got Gary Marshall's blessing was by doing this, but they took the script from the movie and word for word, that was the book for the show. And it drove me nuts because, like we were saying earlier with Beetlejuice, you're getting a new experience when you have a new story. It has the nods to the film that you loved, but it's its own story. Here, I was like, I could have sat at home and watched a much better version of Pretty Woman than listening to these awful songs that they've put in the stage show. And I knew exactly what was coming because it was word for word. I'm not kidding you when I say it was word for word the same script. I could have quoted it because I know that movie so well. I could have quoted what the actors were saying while I was watching them. There is so much hatred that I have for that show. And I'm sorry because I know that there was a lot of work put into it. I respect actors. I respect the crew and everybody who did it, but somebody had the wrong idea when they decided to put that on stage.
This is probably the angriest I've ever seen, Gina. I kind of like it.
Guys, you don't even know how much I hate that show.
Well, you know what? Maybe there's something to be said because I was talking before about how you can't really capture a musical into a movie, but maybe it's the same thing around as well. You can't really just convert a movie into a musical. I know I'm kind of repeating what you just kind of said.
I hate remakes in general. They bother me just because I think that Hollywood, Broadway, whomever has the money is afraid of doing something new. So they pick something that did really well. And I don't know if you can hear my dog jingling in the background, but they pick something that did really well and say, let's just do it again with famous people. And maybe people will fall in love with it. And that drives me nuts because does anybody know the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
Yes.
Okay, so Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was directed by Frank Oz. That is a remake of an earlier film that flopped. And he said the only movie worth making is a flop because I can turn it around into something worthwhile. I'm not quoting him directly, but that was the general idea, that you should only remake something that you can make better. If you have something that is already wonderful and loved, why would you try and redo that? Because you'll never recapture what was already done. And I think that's why it bothered me that they tried to take Pretty Woman and put it on the stage and didn't change anything. If they had done something different and just had an homage to the old film, I might have appreciated it more. But the fact that it was word for word the same thing drove me nuts.
So not a fan of The Hustle either, huh?
No. Don't get me started. Again, I love and respect everybody who puts work into these projects. I think those actresses are wonderful. But they again took the same script. They didn't even change the cons, guys. It was the same damn con. No, I can't. Bothered me so much. And I get that there are new audiences who haven't seen these old films, but guess what? Those films are available. They can go back and watch it. So why don't you give the new generation something new? Because there are plenty of writers out there who are creating new content. And instead of giving them work, they're pulling from this pool of already successful material and asking somebody who's already established to rewrite it. Why?
Well, Gina, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate you coming on and giving insight to musicals as well as Eurovision. Is there anything you would like to promote before you leave?
Sure. Well, I have 2 films on YouTube right now, which I highly recommend everybody watches, especially if you need some levity in today's craziness. One is Frame of Reference, which also has a musical element to it. There's some singing, dancing in that. So Frame of Reference on YouTube, and also Cruel and Unusual Therapy on YouTube, which is a short 7-minute sex comedy, romantic comedy. So that one's really funny. And in a completely different note, we mentioned before that I am the founder of the Westfield International Film Festival. which is currently producing the Black Voices Matter Festival. It's specifically an Instagram festival taking place on Instagram TV, IGTV. And if you'll go to our social media pages, you'll see more about that. So just search for Westfield International Film Festival on Instagram, on Facebook, and you'll see a little bit more about that project. You can also find us on filmfreeway.com, and you'll see more about it.
Cool. And we'll probably try to throw one of those up on our social media as well, just to give it a little more attention. Gina, again,
Great.
Thank you very much for coming on the show today. We hope you join us again sometime. And we hope, and I don't know what to say. I should have thought of an actual outro here. Thank you very much for coming on to the show.
That's okay. I'm happy to come back anytime. Thank you for having me, guys. Bye.
Hey guys, did you like what you saw in that video? Then please feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube, as well as hit that bell to get notified of future videos. And if you liked what you heard in this episode, you can actually listen to the full episode right now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean. Until next time, guys, bye-bye.